Wow. I was almost late. Almost. How is everybody doing tonight? This is, of course, Unfound Live for September 29th of 2025. And it is a friend of mine's birthday today. How do I sound now? I'm back now. Don't know what this is. For some reason, we once in a while have my all right, sounds good now, Lisa. I don't know. I don't know what it is. Sometimes this mic just cuts out. I don't know what it is. Might be a wire thing. I'm just not sure. But at some point, if I'm not anybody's not hearing me, please let me know, because of course I can't tell. Please let me know if you can't hear me. Because then I'll just yank this wire out of here, and we'll have to do it with me just using the microphone from the computer. But once again, if you can't hear me, let me know. I got a fantastic show lined up for all of you tonight. As you can see, as somebody asked me, was it last week? I think it was, about the disappearance of Brandon Swanson. So I'm going to give that disappearance a shot on some analysis and whatever else. Also want to talk about the yogurt shop murders that got solved recently through DNA. And we'll see if there's anything that we can use from that to look at disappearances in new informative ways. And then we have a feel-good story. In fact, I'm going to eventually start out when we get to the true crime portion of this show tonight. I am going to start out with the feel-good story first. Hello, Fishing. What's going on with you? Good to see you. Let me pull my notes up here over on my other computer. But yeah, hello, Fishing. Who else is in here? And while you are watching tonight, what do I always say? Please give this show thumbs up. Please consider subscribing to this channel. You can support Unfound through a variety of ways at patreon.com right there on the screen. You can hit the join button below. You can subscribe to this channel. You can hit the super chat button below the chat if you're watching on YouTube. And you can go to paypal.me/Unfound podcast. Just remind all of you. So once again, most importantly, give this show a thumbs up tonight while you're watching it. If you're over on Facebook watching, you can do that over there as well. Hello, Captain. Not a name that is familiar to me, but hello, Captain. How are you? Charlie, how are you doing? Good to see you, Lisa. MT, everyone have finally made to the beginning of the live show. Yeah, MT, look at you. You can hear me now. Once again, if you cannot hear me, let me know. Hello, Fishing. Hey, it's Matt. Hello, Mary. How are you? Good to see you. I know we've exchanged a couple messages recently. And DD, enjoying the new episode. Are very good, DD. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you all for taking part in listening to the revisitation of Stephen Kocher that came out this past Friday. I wanted to do that because, as you know, there's a think tank that I run on Sunday evenings, patreon.com/unfound podcast, if you'd like to participate in that. Sunday evenings at 7 p.m. Eastern. And, of course, Stevens was an episode that came out before the think tank ever got started. And the interesting thing is, at least a couple members of the think tank, they came to Unfound because of that episode. So although they found out about Unfound through the Stephen Kocher episode, they never had a chance to discuss it in the think tank privately, like what we do there. And so I thought it was about time to make that happen. And we had a very long discussion, over an hour and a half. So thank you for enjoying that new episode, Dee Dee. Thanks for saying so. As for what has gone on with me since we all got together, my trivia team on Wednesday night won again, and we won $100 cash. So we ended the season on the highest of notes. We won the season, and then we won the playoff game and won $100. So all good. It was a very, very, very nice season for us. That's the second season we've won this year, going back to January, February, March. We won that season, those 3 months. We came in second the season that was April, May, and June. Kind of gave that season away, to be honest. And then we came back and won this season. It was really, 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 really nice. And then on top of that, I joined some of my teammates in another place on Saturday evening, and we won there too. And in fact, over there, we scored the most points that team has ever attained. I think out of a total of 136 points, we got 132. Some crazy number like that. So that was really, really good. How much did I contribute? Not a lot. I knew there's a question that nobody else knew. What was the name of Joey Tribbiani's agent on Friends? What was her name? Of course, she wasn't in a ton of episodes, but when she was in one, it was always noteworthy. And that was the question. What was the name of his agent? And for some reason, her name just popped into my head. Now, of course, being honest, I've seen a lot of Friends reruns over the years, so that helped. But it was only like 1 point or something like that. It was not a very big point question. But I did my part, let's just say. And as you could probably tell, I'm actually pretty, as you know, I've won by myself before. I think I've won by myself 3 times, maybe, over the years. When you're competing against groups of people, I mean, that's really something to do that. So I'm a pretty good trivia player, but in the team setting, it's amazing how much I really don't usually contribute a ton. There are a few questions, but not many that I happen to know the answers and nobody else does. It happens, but not as much as you might think. In fact, you might say that about any of the questions. It just seems that most of the time in the teams that I play on, more than one person knows the answer to any one question, which is helpful. So we start the next season on Wednesday again. We'll see what we can do there. One of my teammates is going to go off and play at another place I think he maybe just needs to change of scenery, kind of. After a while, maybe it does get a little bit monotonous. So Fishing is saying the audio is off. All right, I'm going to have to leave here for a moment and just use the audio from the computer. Hold on one second. I'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. All right. I've gotten that mic out of I don't know what's going on there. How's that? Is that better for everybody? Once again, you got to let me know if you can hear me. So I'm just going to continue in what I was saying. I even admit after a while the trivia every week, the same place, it does get a little monotonous, to be honest with you, even when you're winning. Need a change of scenery, need some new competitors and everything. So I really cannot blame him. But we will forge on over there at Finley's on Wednesdays and at least make it to the end of the year. And then maybe we'll make something new happen at the beginning of 2026. We'll just have to see. In other news, they began construction on my place, the building today. You could hear, wasn't too bad. In fact, I did an interview today with some rumbling going on in the background, and I don't think you're going to hear it this Friday. I don't think you'll be able to hear what was going on in the background anyway. And as long as it stays like that, I think everything will be fine. But I did have to move everything off my balcony today. All of my furniture, all that great furniture that I put together earlier this year is now out on the landing by the elevators, and it's going to be there for a while. I don't think that I will be able to put that furniture back on there until they finish this part of the building for insurance reasons. And I think what happened last week, and here's a funny story. There is a storage closet out on the balcony. So you go out the balcony, the sliding doors are right here to my left. You make a left, you go down to the end of the balcony, and there is a door there that is locked. And it takes the same key as my front door. And I've never opened it. And the reason I've never opened that door, mainly, I've tried to look in there, but the door was swollen shut. So I could get the key to work after I got some WD-40 in there and everything. The key would turn, would not open. Absolutely swollen shut. And I've, so 6.5 years, it's been shut. But being that they're going to be working on this balcony, and yes, they're going to be coming through here. I don't even know exactly what they're doing. But they want everything out of the storage unit out there moved out as well, taken out. I didn't even have any idea if there was even anything in there because, once again, I couldn't get that door open. So not the landlord, but the realtor who I found this place through, she sent two of her handyman guys last week, and the one guy's been here before. His name's Don, real cool guy. They came, and here the hinges were all rusted together. It was all a big mess. No surprise, being that it's all metal and it's not stainless steel or whatever. And it was all rusted because of the salt air and everything. So they had to mess with it for a while. And they did get the door open. And what did it look like inside this little storage unit that's about 9 feet high, 3 feet wide, like the width of a regular sized door, and then about 3 feet of that same distance deep. Speaking of friends, given that I just said that, passed along that trivia question. Do you remember the Friends episode? It was late in its run, might have been the next to last season or the last season, where they finally opened that door that was at the back of the set that was by the bathroom. Do any of you remember that? I even forget why Chandler and Joey were even back there, but they were trying to open that door. Remember, with the women's place, and of course there was the kitchen, and then the bedrooms were on the far side of the set, far right side, and then the back was like that balcony out there where a lot of things happened. But on the back wall there was that door that just sat there for all those years, and then finally Chandler and Joey opened that door up. Remember? I don't know if you remember that. And they opened it up, and what did they find? There was all this stuff that was just stacked to the top of this place. Monica, being the neat freak and everything, pretending she's so neat. You open that door in this closet that she has, there's just junk piled to the top of it. That's what this closet looked like. That if you ever seen that episode, that's what that closet look like out there. And it was all full of like beach stuff, like little floaty butter, what do they call those, wings or whatever, and then those like tube things you can use to float, and the rods and reels in there, like stuff, beach balls you could blow up, all sorts of beach stuff. And it was packed to the top. And it has to all be taken out. And I told my realtor, I'm not doing that, and you're not putting it in. It's all crusty and sandy, and it's none of my stuff. It's the owners of this condo stuff. Obviously, it's not important because they've never come and gotten it for the last 6.5 years. So the same guy that took the door off the hinges is going to come over here tomorrow and empty all that stuff out. But it was funny when I saw it. It immediately reminded me of that Friends episode. Like I said, it had to have been in the next to last season or the last season, and I can't remember why they opened that door up. But they just found all this junk stuff. I wouldn't necessarily say this is junk stuff, but it's obviously not needed, being it's been in there for 6.5 years, and I haven't had any use for it or anything else. So keep the rods and reels. Well, they're not mine, D. They're not mine. And so they're getting taken away because I'm not keeping that stuff in here. There's no room for it in here. It's just, there's just nothing. So they have to take it away because it can't be out there for whatever reason, whatever they're going to be doing out there. So that guy's going to come over and take that away. Well, the companion story to this, I know I'm boring you all to death, but I'm telling the story anyway, is that the screen doors for my sliding doors right here going out under the balcony, both sliding screen doors. I have two screen doors that come together. I have two balcony doors that come together like this. And then there are screen doors that are like this as well. So I can, of course, open the doors up and just have the screen shut so no insects or anything get in here. Well, I took one of the doors off. I finally got it off its rails, and I put that out there too. But it took me a while. It was it's so messed up. It's so messed up. I'm gonna guess that these sliding screen things have not been taken off the rails since they were installed maybe almost 40 years ago. So it took me a while, and I don't think I've ever done that before, but to get those little wheels to push them up, and you have to unscrew the thing to lighten up the spring and everything. What a mess. The things were all rusted, and I had to put WD-40 on it to get the screws to turn without stripping them. So I got one of them done today. The other one's still there. I'm going to do that, hopefully get that done tomorrow morning. But that was no fun. I was covered in dirt. I had to go. It was so nasty. I had to lie down on the balcony out there where it's kind of sandy and everything. Oh, it was not good. And it took me a while. It was hot and everything. It was kind of nasty. Got one of them done. Luckily, I didn't break anything and getting the one screen door out. But this other one of the screws that you use to loosen the spring so you can push the little wheels up, it seems to be, I put WD-40 on it. We'll see if it's loosened up tomorrow, I hope. But I got in a fight with a screen door today, and the door almost won, is what I'm telling you. So the other one still have not won that battle, but it looks like we're going to go all 15 rounds to get this other one in. And I'm a fairly handyman type of guy. If you show me a video or something, I can catch on to things pretty fast. I don't do anything naturally regarding that. But if you show me a video or something, I can pick up on it pretty fast. It's just with this, I'm working with something that I don't think has been touched in decades, and it's kind of cranky, and it's all plastic, and it's been baked. And so the plastic, you have to really watch it because it's very brittle. So that's what I was doing today. But I did get an interview done today, though. That's probably the best part. Even after all that, I did a really good interview today that you are going to hear on Friday. Hello, D. I hope I'm well by Thursday. Well, I'm sorry you're not feeling so well, D. Sorry about that. So let's get into tonight's show. Like I said, before I'm done, I will be talking about the disappearance of Brandon Swanson. Also want to talk about the yogurt shop murders from way back when that got solved through DNA recently. And then also a feel-good story. And in fact, I'm going to start with the feel-good story. Sorry to hear that's COVID, D. That stinks. That is not good. Sorry to hear that. I wonder who gave that to you, D. I wonder. But the feel-good story is something that I have known about for a little while now, but I wasn't allowed to tell. You know, that's sometimes the position that I'm put in with doing this podcast. People tell me things behind the scenes, and I'm sworn to secrecy, just like going back when Adam Turner revealed that he had solved what happened to Mary Jane Van Gilder. He did that in February of 2024. I knew about that since like November of 2023 and was not allowed to tell anybody. And I kept my word. I didn't tell anybody. I kept it under wraps. You know, I'm a guy that can be trusted. I'm a reporter. My job is to bring news to the masses. But if somebody's going to tell me something in confidence, then I am sworn to that. I can keep promises like that. So the feel-good story here is, of course, a few years ago, well, maybe in, 2023, we found out that Trevor Nichols, remember, young man in the military up there in New York, was supposed to be getting transferred to Kansas, to another military base or fort or whatever they call it, in Kansas. And he was supposed to stop in Ohio and meet his wife and his child. And then they were moving to Kansas for his new assignment. And somewhere within all of that, he went missing. And the circumstances were a bit vague. You might remember there was some of his fellow Army comrades that were there. They allegedly saw him get on a train, or didn't they? Did they? There was a story about how Trevor kind of went missing, and then they found him like at a Burger King or something. Maybe this is all coming back to some of you at this point. But he went missing. And I will tell you at the time that I thought that there was a decent chance that he was still alive. I don't know if I didn't go back and look and see what I wrote exactly for the Patreon blog on that. But I just have remembered since we covered that disappearance, when was it? In 2019, 2020 or something like that. I always was it's always one that came into my mind that there's a decent chance that Trevor might still be alive. Not saying that was absolutely my first choice or anything, but it did seem, of all the disappearances that have been featured on Unfound, that seemed like one where it was more likely than others. In contrast to, let's just say, Jody Huisentruth, let's just say. Well, at some point then in 2023, we had found out, and I made it public, that in 2022, the year before, some police in San Diego, guess what? They had run across Trevor, and he was alive. They had a picture of him. He was homeless or transient, not sure what he had been doing between him being seen in New York and in San Diego, how he got there. And but he was alive. It wasn't one of these pictures where you're like, no, that's not the missing person. This was one where, oh yeah, that's Trevor Nichols. It's not somebody else with his ID. It's certainly Trevor. And wow, he's alive. And Derek's saying, yeah, he's alive according to his family. Yes, Derek. Well, what I found out, how long ago now? Maybe back in July. I was told by his mother, who was the guest, Erin Nichols. She told me back then, in confidence, that Trevor would be coming home in September. And that happened. Was it yesterday or I think, this past weekend, that happened. And if you follow is it called Where's Trevor Nichols, or Find Trevor Nichols, whatever the Facebook page is, you can go there and you can see them. Erin, who, once again, his mother, who was the guest, meeting him at the airport, and there he is. Put on a few pounds since the pictures we had of him for his disappearance. But you look at him, it's like, oh yeah, that is Trevor Nichols. Absolutely. Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. And so he is home. He is back seeing his family. Of course, he has, I think, some siblings, some brothers at least. I forget if he has any sisters, but they were waiting for him at the airport, and there he was. They got him to come back to, where's Erin from? Is she from Ohio? I forget where they're from now. I forget. But he flew in there, and they are now all back together. Now, what has happened over all these years, I don't know. And being, of course, the guy that I am, I did tell Erin, well, if Trevor ever wants to talk about it, I'd love to talk to him about it. And I would love to interview him and have that be played as an episode. But you know me, I'm not really aggressive like that either. I'm not going to press people. I just let people know when it comes to situations like that. Well, I'd really love to talk to the person, but I understand. Certainly like to be, if he is going to talk to any media, maybe he'll do some local media, and certainly I can understand why they might get the story first. But from a disappearance point of view, from a true crime point of view, from a point of view of learning about, if he's willing to talk about, everything that was going through his mind and living on the streets. And, certainly I think that would help all of us. I would not be doing this for any other reason than educational purposes. But I think it can happen. I just don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. And in fact, as I'm thinking about this, you might remember that Brandon Roberts from Portland, Oregon, remember he went missing and then he was found alive after he got burned. He was in the hospital. To my knowledge, he's still alive. To my knowledge, he is still around. His family, I think, coincidentally, also in Ohio. And I'd certainly love to talk to him, although I've not spoke to his mother recently. But that's another interview that I would, like to do sometime. Kind of the same situation, although I don't think Trevor had the drug issues that Brandon had. But I am inclined to think that they both had some mental issues that were going on. So maybe that is the commonality here. In addition, Brandon had much more of a history of living on the streets and everything, and of course, than Trevor ever did, being in the military. So that is the feel-good story. I'm not entirely sure how this all came to happen yet, because the way I understand it, when he was found alive in San Diego, really by accident, there was nobody really looking for him down there, but he was somewhere transient, homeless, and cops, hey man, what are you doing? And he had the ID, and guess what? He gave the name Trevor Nichols, or he had ID to that effect. And then eventually that worked its way back to his family. Now, what went on in that time? Did they have any communications like in 2023 or 2024? I have no idea. And thus, I don't know how this all came about now here in 2025. I don't know. So there you go. Maybe I'll find out one of these days if Aaron feels like talking about it. Once again, I'm not a reporter who ever people. I want, especially the guests, to think that I'm pressuring them to tell me, what happened. That's not really who I am. It's really not the kind of work that I do. I certainly want the story, but I realize that all of this is very, very delicate. And I never want to come across like I'm working for TMZ or the National Enquirer, or as a lawyer, some ambulance chaser or something like that. I really, 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 really try to avoid that. I simply just put it out there. Well, I'd love to talk to him. I think that would be interesting to learn about all of this. I think the audience would find it interesting as well and educational. So we'll see if that happens. But I'll say what I said before. It doesn't, not terribly or actually totally surprising that he was alive. It was, when that was exposed, maybe in 2023, that he had been seen alive in 2022. I think it was 2022. I can't say I was overwhelmingly surprised or anything. But I will say, though, on the other hand, it's a little surprising that, that it got this good. It very well could be that he just continued to do his thing and didn't want anything to do with his family anymore. And very well. And I think a lot of times that is what happens. Amy, why are my comments? Nobody's deleted any of your comments, Amy. You have to watch. It just depends on, as I've learned with the think tank, Amy, you really have to watch the words that you use. There's some sort of filter going on here that's been for a while. I don't know what you're trying to type. Try putting it in completely different words if you can, because I will tell you, no, I'm the only moderator in here tonight, and I have not deleted anything. So I apologize. That has to be a YouTube thing, not an Unfound or Ed thing. So I would try using different words, or maybe If you really, really need to use the word, maybe put a space between each letter or something like that, Amy. Let me see what everybody's saying at this point. Lisa, Kansas isn't that bad. I remember he didn't want to go to Fort Riley in June. Yes, that was the fort. Yes. Junction City. Yeah. MT, appreciate your respect for the missing. Thanks, MT. No problem, Ed. Thank you. Yeah, Amy, your comments are not being deleted. They're being probably filtered by YouTube because there might be a word in there that YouTube doesn't like. It does seem like when we do the think tank, even though that's a private discussion, things still get taken out. And people are like, well, why am I not seeing my comment? I don't know. So, if you type suicide or murder or words like that, abuse or things like that, sometimes it sets off the YouTube filter, Amy, and that goes for the rest of you as well. D is wrong. I don't know. Is wrong question. I don't know what that means, D. I don't know what that means. So Trevor Nichols, if your mother is having you listen to this or watch this tonight, or somewhere down the road you see this live show, I'd love to talk to you. But most importantly, I'm so happy that you're alive. And I'm so happy that you've gotten back together with your family. I wish you decades of a long life ahead of you. I really, really hope that happens for you. And I hope it's all good. What a story. What a story. Fantastic story. And we have to take these when we can, because as you all know, most of these disappearances that are old enough to get onto Unfound do not end this way. And in fact, after 380 disappearances, how many people have been found alive? 3. Patrick Reed, Brandon Roberts, 4. I'm sorry. Brandon Roberts. It's going to test my Ashley Linden. There you go. Brandon Roberts, Patrick Reed, Trevor Nichols. And then, of course, we know of a woman who lived long after she disappeared, but of course, she wasn't living at the point that Unfound did its coverage. And of course, that is Mary Jane Van Gilder. That's it. Now, the next question is, do you think there are other disappearances that Unfound is featured where people are alive? I would say yes. Given it's been 3, 4, I would have to say that it's more than that. I don't know on a number. It would not surprise me if it was 5 more, 6 more. So like of the total of 380 disappearances, including the 4 that I've already mentioned, if there are 6 others to get to 10, I don't know if I would be overtly surprised by that. Now, if it gets up to 20, then I think that I'd be getting into surprised range. 15 maybe, but you get to 20. If I were to be told somebody would have that secret information and it could be trusted, there's 16 others where people are still out there living that you don't know about, Ed. I'd be very surprised by that. But I wouldn't be surprised if it was 6 more, even if it was maybe 10 more. But you get to that's just the feeling that I have for it. And of course, I would have to go through each one of Unfound's disappearances to pick those ones out. I'm certainly not going to try to do that off the top of my head. But I think it still can happen for some of Unfound's guests. That's why you always keep working. That's why you always keep working. I meant, what is wrong, Gur? Oh, a story of hope. So happy for Trevor and family. Amy says, not just Unfound. Yeah. Your revisiting of Stephen Coach's case reminded me of Mason Smith's disappearance. He disappeared from St. George in 2015. Part of me thinks he's still alive. I'm familiar with that disappearance, not overtly, Derek. I think that was a disappeared episode at one point. Young teenager, right? And he left and never came back. Maybe was having some emotional issues or trouble at school, something like that. Just a couple things bouncing around in my head. Possible, Derek. Just have to hope that if he took off on his own, that he didn't run into the wrong person or group. He was 17, yeah. Right. Could be, the tough thing about St. George, Utah, having been there many times between 2005 and 2009, many times, that is a place that's even though it's kind of built up over the years, late 90s, I haven't been there since like 2009 or 2010, but it certainly did get bigger in my estimation. Still, it's out in the middle of nowhere. St. George is. So if he's thinking about running away or walking to some other place, it is a long way. Could he have gotten in an 18-wheeler or something, hitched a ride? Could have. But, we know the risks of doing something like that. But I am familiar with his disappearance of, generally, but I would not say I know anything more about it than any other person, Derek. Yeah. St. George, that is a St. George disappearance, right? So, yeah, 2015. So 10 years ago, he'd be 27 now. Possible. Rockford, I had to jump in now. I've kept a running list of unfound disappearances where I think there's a decent chance the person's still alive. Now that I've listened to all this update episodes, I will update it. Now, I even know before Rockford says anything more than his post is that his number of the people he thinks are still alive in Unfound's catalog is way a lot more than what I think. Rockford, if you're just jumping, you heard me talk a couple minutes ago. I said, if the number is 20, I would be really surprised. I think with Rockford, his list starts at 20. So I would be interested to see that. It's been a little while, Rockford, since, you sent me anything like that. But I do specifically remember that email, and I remember looking at it and thinking, boy, that's a big number. It's not like everybody should know. It's not 100. But it's way more. The way I remember it, it was way more than 20. And that was only when Unfounded covered maybe 320 disappearances or something. We've done like 60 since then. So, all right, Rockford, I'll be ready. Of course, I owe you an email from yesterday or the day before. I'll get to that, but I'll be looking for your updated list of the unfound missing people you think are still alive. I'll be looking for that. All right, so that's your feel-good story for the night. Let's move on. Let's go to a story that unfortunately, at least to this point, is not yet a feel-good story. It could still end up being a feel-good story, and that is the disappearance of Brandon Swanson. Rockford says, yeah, we're a little bit apart on that one, but it makes for good discussion. It does. It is a good constructive discussion, Rockford, no denying that. Brandon Swanson. Before I get into this, where would I put Brandon Swanson's in like the hierarchy of well-known disappearances in the United States in the 21st century? It's not on the Mara Murray level. It's not on the Brian Schaefer level. It's not on the Jennifer Kessie level. Might be the next level, maybe. It might be there, like maybe coincidentally with Brandon Lawson, being that he was missing for so long. We now know what happened there. Last week, being that I talked about Ray Griecar last week, maybe on that level, maybe. You may have a different interpretation of it, but just knowing about this disappearance for quite a while, it's certainly not on the number one most publicly known disappearance, but like I said, maybe next tier. So we got I don't want to put it according to grades. They're all horrible. But there's the most known, and then the almost most known, and the almost most well known might be on the third tier. But I've had people ask me about it. In fact, somebody even asked me about it last week. Well, what do you think about that? Well, it gave me an opportunity to take a look at his disappearance and then tell all of you about it. Just some analysis from what the public information is. I've never spoken to anyone in Brandon's family. However, I will tell you that some point within the last year, maybe on a Saturday night, maybe in those days when I was having some sleep issues and I was up late and wondering if I was going to actually go to sleep that night, I did do, what do we call a deep dive? I hate cliches, but a deep dive into Brandon's, looked at the maps, web sleuths, Reddit, one night, but it's been a while, but it does help me do what I'm going to do tonight. Sure thing. Ed is free to share my list if how he chooses. All right. I'll remember that, Rockford. Thank you. All right. So I'm just going to read some of the Charlie Project page on Brandon's disappearance, and then I'll get into trying to understand the things seemingly the way they happened and whatever happened. Just looking at the analysis and the things that I would want to know more about this disappearance that do not seem to be in the public sphere. Swanson was last seen in Marshall, Minnesota on May 14th of 2008. It was the last day of classes at Minnesota West Community and Technical College in Canby, Minnesota, where he was enrolled in a wind turbine program and had gone out with a friend to celebrate. Swanson was on his way home to Marshall when he accidentally drove his car into a ditch where it got stuck. He wasn't injured in the accident. He called his parents on his cell phone at 12:30 a.m. and asked for help. His parents were unable to find him. So Swanson said he was going to walk to the nearby town of Lind, Minnesota, where he could see lights. He was on the phone with his father while he was walking. Shortly after 2 a.m., Swanson suddenly swore, and the call ended abruptly. His father tried to call him back several times, but never got an answer. Swanson has never been heard from again. His father spent several hours looking for him, then notified the police at 6:30 a.m. The following day, authorities using cell phone records located Swanson's car 1.5 miles north of the Lincoln County line off Highway 68, west of Taunton, Minnesota. There were no signs of him at the scene. An extensive search of the area turned up no sign of him. The car wasn't anywhere near the place Swanson said it was. He had been 20 miles away from there, 20 miles. Apparently, he had gotten confused about his location. I'll come back to that. Although there were some accounts that he had been drinking alcohol that evening, investigators don't believe he was intoxicated or otherwise impaired when he disappeared. Some authorities believe he blundered into the Yellow Medicine River while he was walking in the dark. All right. So I'm screenshotting so I can remind him later. You do that, D. Yeah, remind me. When Rockford sends that list to me, I will forward it to you, D, so you can look at it. No problem. Now that I know Rockford allows me to do that. All right. First of all, let's kind of set this up as best I can. So he is at a location, and he is going to be driving home, which would have been going in a southeast direction. So if you're looking at the screen, going down toward this lamp, okay? So he's going from the northwest down to the southeast. Now, I have not looked up the location of where he was at this, celebrating the end of the semester. I have not, maybe I did look up the address where his parents lived. I think the most important thing you have to understand here is it's pretty much a straight shot from one city to the other. It's a main road. I don't even know how many lights there are on this road. And to me, that is the first thing that is kind of hard to understand about this disappearance. Because what happened was, I realized most people get caught up in his car was found here and he thought he was down here. Well, that's really confusing. The confusing part for me is, why did he leave that main road in the first place? Now, in a situation, if we were to draw kind of a comparison, compare and contrast, for example, Jason Landry, him driving from where he was going to school to where his parents live, 2-hour drive, was not a straight shot. He was going to have to go on one road, get to that one little town of Luling, make a right, go south for a little bit, then get on the highway and keep going east. It wasn't just he gets on a highway at one entrance to on-ramp, and then travels 2.5 hours, 2 hours, and gets off at another exit, an exit, and he's there. And of course, seemingly he missed this turn. There were no turns for Brandon to miss. Yet his car was not found on that main road between these two main cities. And instead, it was found to the north of that road, maybe a mile off the road. Maybe I think I read 1.25 miles. So at some point, for some reason, he left this main road that he should have stayed on, made a left, and then that's where his car was found. And what's interesting about this is that it was found, and I'm not sure if it was in a ditch or not. And what's also interesting to me is that even though we know that he was talking to his father, no explanation of why he got off that road in the first place. Hard to understand. He didn't say, well, I had to pull off to the side of the road because I had to go to the bathroom. And the fact is, just to be honest, you're on a main road like that and you have to take a leak, at least as a guy. You could just pull to the side. It's 12:30 at night. He could have pulled to the side of the road, gone on to the other side of the car, stood there, done that, and probably another car wouldn't have even passed him. And nobody would have said, it's dark. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. You do not have to drive 1 mile off the road to do something like that. Now, not to get too into bodily functions, but if you had to do the other thing, then yes, that's going to get a little more complicated. All right, granted, it's going to get a little more complicated, but I still don't know if you have to drive 1 mile or a quarter off the road. And in all the stories that I've ever read about this disappearance, he never told his father, well, you know what, I pulled off the road because I had to go to the bathroom and I went into a ditch. All we know is he says he went into a ditch. As you would expect, that bothers me. All right. So we don't even know why he got off that main road in the first place. Now, he might have been drinking. Now, of course, it says in here, although there were some accounts that he had been drinking alcohol that evening, investigators don't believe he was intoxicated or otherwise impaired when he disappeared. And in fact, I don't think his parents have ever said that. I mean, it was his father. I don't think his father has ever said in all these years, when I was talking to Brandon, when I was talking to Brandon, he never said he was intoxicated. Maybe he was, and the father just doesn't want anybody to know. We know families do that. We know parents do that. They don't want to let anybody know that their son was drinking. And so, in the case, one thing that I think I need to start accentuating more and more about disappearances is that sometimes people tell stories at the beginning of a disappearance that are lies just for whatever reason. They're not necessarily malicious. They're not the suspects, but they tell some story because they think the missing person is going to pop up a couple days later alive. And then that story the person told it will absolutely 100% be forgotten over time. The problem starts when, of course, the missing person isn't found. And that story that person told doesn't go away. And then they are locked into that story seemingly forever. Because why? Because they told it originally, and they don't want to admit they lied back then. And I will tell you, in my job of analyzing disappearances, that can be something that is difficult to analyze. And when I think it's even harder to explain it sometimes to guests. That person said that, and I think, well, maybe that person didn't tell the truth at the time. Well, then why wouldn't that person just tell everybody that they lied back then? Well, that's not human nature. That's not what people do. Especially since after all these years, maybe a search, an investigation, or something else has been directed because of what this person said. So when it comes back to Brandon Lawson, it very well may be that he was drunk. His father didn't want to say anything at the beginning because he's thinking, well, Brandon's going to pop up one of these days sober, and I don't want to get him in trouble for drinking and driving, and I don't want to embarrass him or anything. So he says, oh no, when he was talking to him, he sounded completely sober. And then he's stuck to that. He's stuck in that story because that's what he told originally, because it's going to make him look stupid. Now people, know that he lied. And so they stick with that story. We have to realize that happens. We can never expect, we shouldn't be so naive to expect that people are going to reverse their lies. Okay? It's something that's very hard, I think, for people to understand. People tell a story early on. They just feel like saying something. They think, I'm just going to say this person's going to be found alive somewhere alive and whatever. And then 20 years later, a person's still missing. That person's locked into that story. I think that happens way more than even I could predict it. D says, oh, Ed, my ex who tried to kill me. Well, thanks for telling me, D. I don't know why you had to put that in the chat, but thanks for telling me. Rockford, I'm throwing my red challenge flag on the non-texted claim. How would they know? I think there's some decent circumstantial evidence suggesting he may have at least been tipsy. Certainly, Rockford. Certainly. All I'm trying to say here is it seems that this was a straight shot from one town to the other, and he's on some side road. No explanation. No explanation that, to his father that he was talking to, obviously, for a decent while. All right, so there's that. We also have to try to understand this was not a situation where he was just a mile or two from where he said he was. It was 20 miles. And in fact, in trying to recreate at least the way the father understood it, the father understood, according to what Brandon was telling him, that Brandon was a lot closer to his destination than the car ended up being. And in fact, the car ended up being found north of this main road, closer to where the trip started. Whereas the way he was explaining where he was, it was closer to his destination and south of that main road as best as he could tell. And that's where, my understanding, that's where the father went to look for him that night. And that's why he couldn't find him. Brandon saying, well, I can see this town's lights off in the distance, and I'm going to be walking there. So from all of that, the father said, oh, he must be down in this area somewhere. It was like 20 miles off. I mean, that is a long way. And so, Rockford, I hear what you're saying about being tipsy, but wow. if he was really, really, really that off, that is something. It almost gives me the impression that maybe this wasn't exactly necessarily alcohol that we're talking about. No proof of that. I just want to state for the record, no proof, at least, and I understand why Rockford's doubtful about this. I think a lot of people are. Well, he probably was drinking and he thought he was going this direction and was that direction. Being off by 20 miles is something. And even like Brandon Lawson knew where he was. Of course, we now suspect that Brandon Lawson probably was on something. But he did describe where he was. That's where his truck was. Of course, we know everything else he said that night was not true. But he even knew where he was. So I'm not sure what to make of this. How do you lose, 20 miles? Let's just say that's 25 minutes. How do you lose 25 minutes of a trip? It's hard to understand. So we don't know why he would have, even if he were drunk, why did he make a left off this road? No explanation, no idea. And of course, if I were to talk to his family, if I were to talk to his father, like I said, I don't think they do media anymore. They did at one time. I think they're all, as some families do. It's just like, you know what, I'm burnt out on this. I need to move on from this. I would ask him that question. Did you not wonder how he got stuck in a ditch on a main road? Did he give any explanation on how that happened? Was he making a U-turn? What was your impression of why he got stuck in this ditch? That's one of the first questions I'm sure that I would ask his father. Fairly sure. Now, on top of that, there is something called confirmation bias. That if he was really as that discombobulated and drunk, or maybe he was doing other stuff high, whatever you want to say, you're going to be much more likely to have confirmation bias happen. And what do I mean by that? I mean that you think that you are in a particular area at night, like he was, and you see something off in the distance, and because you think that you're in a particular location, that you see lights off in the distance, and you think, well, that must be where I'm going. You never stop to think, well, maybe I'm not where I think I am, and maybe those lights in the distance aren't the town that I think it is. Maybe that's in totally the opposite direction. This happens a lot with plane crashes, with pilots. This usually happens under circumstances where they are tired. It happens under circumstances where they have something called get there-itis, where they may be motivated by, getting to an airport before it closes, or getting to an airport before a storm hits, or getting to an airport because, if it's a private plane a passenger's really, really, really putting pressure on you to land a plane when maybe you shouldn't because it's raining too hard or it's snowing or anything. That's called get there-itis. And that can then cause confirmation bias. I think I see something that is right when really what I'm seeing is not, in fact, factual. A lot of confirmation bias. I think I'm going to see something, thus I see something. And our minds can play tricks with us like that. It's kind of a little bit like a Rorschach test. Those ink blotter tests that I don't even know if they do them anymore. But it's like an ink blotter, and you put the thing. Well, what do you see? What do our minds do? Our minds try to see patterns. Our minds try to see things that make sense to us. It's no different than looking up in the sky and thinking that, a cloud looks like a dog. That's what our mind does. Even though we know that cloud is not a dog, it's amazing how our mind tries to turn things into a certain shape or something. And this could have been what was going on with Brandon here. Whether he was drunk or not, confirmation bias can happen to sober people too, where for whatever reason he's in this ditch. He's mistaking where he is. He sees something off in the distance, maybe doesn't totally realize where he is, but he thinks he's in a certain place, sees lights off in the distance, says, oh, I must have been farther down this road than I thought because that's that town, and it's really not that town. And that's what gets you in trouble because he's maybe thinking, well, here's what I know. Between where I think I am in that town, I know that the Yellow River doesn't run through there. Well, he's in the wrong place. That's not really the town he's trying to get to. And guess what? The Yellow River does run through there. And then, as we heard in the, he said this, he swore, called his parents. Shortly after 2 a.m., Swanson suddenly swore, and the call ended abruptly. Now, if we're keeping track of the timeline, and I'm not sure if they were on the phone for that entire time, but that is an hour and a half. From the time he called his parents at 12:30 to the time that this call ended abruptly, that was an hour and a half. That's a lot of time. Going back to what Rockford posted here, that's a lot of time to be able to figure out if your son is intoxicated or not. It could have been. We know. I can remember back in my Star Trek days, there was a guy that worked with me who would drunk call people, including me. He'd be at home all alone, and he'd just start dialing numbers. And people would pick up, and they'd be on the phone with them for a while. So, it is possible the drunk person could call somebody and be on the phone for that long. But that is a long time to not be able to figure out where your son is. And for the son not to be able to figure out where he is. And what also occurs to me is this is a point that I've brought up in I know you'll like this, D, the disappearance of Molly Miller and Colt Haynes. Of course, they were with Con Nip. They're in that car chase, getting chased by the police. Con goes off-roading, into the fields and whatever. They get away. Con is somehow able to get away and get back home. He leaves Colt and Molly out there in the middle of nowhere. They're never seen again, even though they even into when the sun came up the next morning, they were on the phone talking to people, and people were trying to track them down, couldn't do it. And of course, the question I've always asked is, they had cell phones, even if it's not necessarily the phones we have today with the bright lights and everything. Could they not just follow the tire tracks, being that it was out in this field or whatever else? Could they not just follow the tire tracks back to the main road? Could they not do that? And when the sun started coming up that morning, could they not see where they were and see, once again, it was in grass, mud, and everything else. You could just follow the tire tracks out the opposite way to get to the main road and figure out how to, get to civilization. And of course, a lot of people believe that there was foul play here. And I will tell you, even though I know Molly's, her aunt, Paula Fielder, who was the guest, absolutely believes it was foul play. I'm not convinced of that. This is the kind of thing I think about with Brandon Swanson. He got off that main road and didn't know how to walk back to the main road. Hour and a half, never walked back to the main road. Like I said, I'm willing to give drunk people a lot of leeway and everything, but I'm not saying he was an addict or anything. But is it possible that Brandon maybe mixed that with some medication? Not necessarily illegal, but was he on some prescription medication, even if it was for ADD or it was for allergies or something like this? This just sounds to me to be more than just good old fashioned, Bud Light alcohol to me. That over an hour and a half, he couldn't just by chance get back to the main road and say, oh my goodness, this is the main road. This is where I'm supposed to be. No. Rockford agreed confirmation bias exacerbated by panic, perhaps. Strong possibility of this occurring in Tyler Davis's case, too. It's probably an underrated factor in a number of disappearances. Yeah. Confirmation bias. Bad. Bad in everything that we do in our lives. When we're trying to see things objectively, but we twist the facts to form it into what we already think. That happens with our politics, with all sorts of things. And it happens visually too. We think we see something and it's not that. It is amazing how the mind can play tricks on ourselves. The one part of the mind can play a trick on another part of the mind. Happens all the time. And if you're, like I said, if you're a pilot or you're a truck driver or those kind of things, can be lethal. Can absolutely be lethal. I would also say that he had a cell phone. Could his father not just, why did he feel so intent on walking? It's also hard to understand. Even if he was where he said he was, do they not have 24-hour towing service in that part of Minnesota? I mean, what we have to think about it this way. What exactly was the plan? What was the plan? I don't know. Because I have never read anything saying, well, he's in a ditch. He calls his father. I know what Edward Dentzel Sr., technically he's not a senior. He has a middle name. I don't. But his name is also Edward. I know what my dad would have told me if I called him and said, hey, Dad, when I was, however, that old, 22 years old, it'd tell me that now. Hey, Dad, I'm stuck in a ditch. You know what it'd say? Call AAA. That's what it'd say. I mean, what can he do? He's not going to be able to come over and pull the car out. So I'm wondering, over that course of that an hour and a half, one of them didn't think about, looking up a towing service for 24/7 and could come find him. It doesn't even sound like they did that. Now, of course, even if they did, probably they wouldn't have found the car anyway, because it seems Brandon didn't know where he was. But why didn't they do that? Hard to understand. He was just going to walk away and hopefully make it home and just leave the car there. Okay. Now, I know that some people, if you go up and, in the interwebs and everything, is there the possibility that Brandon staged his disappearance? I would say that is fairly unlikely. The reason I say that is because if he really wanted to stage his disappearance, the car should have been found where he said it was. I realize, like I said, people who may be a little too sensationalist, a little too uninformed about disappearances, people who just are, can't sleep at 3 a.m. on Reddit. They start talking to other people and they start throwing around all these ideas and everything. If this were staged, he would have done it the right way, I think, and the car would have been found where he said it was, and of course he still would have, would be missing. Because the car was not hidden. It wasn't like we've had a few disappearances where we could believe that the car was hidden. In fact, I just did an Unfound now recently from near where I grew up. In fact, from the city where I was born, Greensburg, Pennsylvania, where it appears that the missing person's car was put in a place that was not obvious. It doesn't sound like that was with Brandon's. He was stuck in a ditch on a side road right there for everybody to see if they were on that road. Well, if he was staging his own disappearance, what's he doing? It's hard to understand. It's really hard to understand how this could be a staging. So I'm not inclined to believe that. Is it possible? So I guess what I'm also saying is, did he make it up that he really didn't fall into that river? Or did he just say that and really he just wanted to leave his life? Like I said, this seems unlikely because he had to know that his car was eventually. Why would he describe one place where he was when he knew eventually people would start going out there looking for his car? And yeah, they wouldn't find it where he said he was, but somebody would eventually find it because it was right along a road just 20 miles away. So I'm not inclined to believe that he was lying with all of this either. The problem we have is, so I think what I'm saying here is my estimation is that Brandon was telling the truth about, seemingly fallen, he swore and then cut off, never to be heard from again. Certainly doesn't mean he necessarily went into a river. He could have been walking along and just fell off an embankment and into the weeds somewhere and died there, hit his head, died, and he just hasn't been found. It doesn't necessarily mean that he went into the Yellow River, which, S's all around that area. Certainly a possibility, but I would not say that's the only possibility. Now, what makes this all tough is we really don't know where he was. We know where the car was, but who would be able to recreate where he walked after that? Especially since he seemingly thought he was one place that he wasn't. I don't know the area. I've never been to the area. I'm guessing at some point, maybe his family or somebody went out there at night, tried to get an idea of what that area does look like. And if you go this direction, does it look like this particular town's in the distance? I hope they've done that. That would be somewhat constructive. But it still probably would not explain, if he went into the river, where he went into the river. I mean, river searches are tough enough as it is. Of course, we've covered a bunch of disappearances on Unfound where, although there's no scientific proof that people went into the river, there's a lot of circumstantial proof. Jake Latchley, Shane Fell, Ben Archer, all of these guys were seemingly within just yards of rivers, went missing. Kind of can gauge if they went in, they probably went in right around here. They're still missing. So how do you go about finding a guy who probably went into a river, but you don't know where he went into the river? I have no idea. And that's probably why this disappearance is still unsolved. As I continue to say, it's kind of a weird thing. I don't know if it's necessarily a paradox, but on one hand, I will insist that people and their cars going missing together are, as I stated recently, the easiest of the hardest with Ian Rogers. People who go missing with their vehicles, and no, it wasn't Ian's vehicle, you know what I mean, go missing with a vehicle, those are the easiest disappearances to solve, even though they're very, very, very difficult. Whereas people without their vehicles who seemingly went into bodies of water are the hardest of the hardest. I will continue to say that. Like I said, there's a kind of a paradox there that we know how often people in their vehicles are found in water. I think some of those are the easiest to solve, but people going into the water without their vehicles are the hardest to solve. So to me, the water kind of disappearance is on each end of that bell curve that we could put together of disappearances. I don't plan things this way. It's just how my mind works them all out. Rockford, not to engage in my own confirmation bias, but consider how many people ditch their cars if they wreck while driving. It's true. I think I went through the numbers, Rockford, in that Ian Rogers. It's an outrageous number. It's like 9,000 a day in the United States. 9,000 cars are abandoned in the United States every day. Variety, some of them are wrecked, but it's just running out of gas, wrecked, broke down for some reason, got carjacked and ditched the car, pick them. All those put together, 9,000 a day. It's crazy. It really, really, really is crazy. So Rockford brings up a good point that on the same day that Brandon Swanson walked away from his car, 8,999 people did the same thing. And so I guess what I would say is, given that huge number, we should not be surprised then if one of those people goes missing. That's how the numbers work out. I know it sucks. It sucks for Brandon Swanson's family. But when you have all of that happening, it stands to reason that somebody is going to go missing. The car will be found. The person will be not found. Whereas if we were just 100 people a day, cars being ditched, then yes, we'd probably go several days, maybe a whole month, maybe a couple months before somebody goes missing that's attached to an abandoned car. But when you have 9,000 a day in a country of 330 million people, we probably have one disappearance connected to an abandoned car every day in the United States, probably. I don't know what the stats say. Brian, hello, Brian. Hi, Ed. Just got here. Wasn't he on the phone with parents for 40 plus minutes? What I'm reading on the Charlie Project, Brian, an hour and a half. Although I'm open to the idea that he might have called them, hung up, called back. Hey, I haven't found my way out of here yet. But it was like an hour and a half total of time from the first dialing of the first call to this him swearing and then the phone going dead. I'm open to the idea that there were several calls back and forth. I don't know if it was one continuous call. I don't know. You would think he would have given a good direction where his location was. Well, Brian, it's clear, at least, that he didn't know where he was. He was explaining to his father where he was, and they were both thinking he was in one particular area, whereas his car was found 20 miles away. And it wasn't even on the right side of the road. Brian, I'm sorry you missed the beginning of this. You probably have to go back and catch when I started this at about 5 till 10 Eastern time or 10 till 10 or something. But I started this off, Brian, by saying the toughest thing for me to understand is it was a straight shot on a main road from where he was to his destination, and somehow he got off on some back road. That's always going to be the part that confuses me. Yeah, Brian, you go back and check that out. So I guess what I'm saying is I'm inclined to believe, I think a lot of people think, that he was in a place where he didn't know where he was, just kind of walking around in the dark, fell down the riverbank into the water, and I'm perfectly willing to believe that. But I don't think that is the end of all of this. I would certainly, I'm not sure if it will ever happen, but I would certainly like to hear more about this phone call. And my instincts tell me, and maybe this is also what Rockford, maybe many of you are picking up on this, whether they were talking for a total of an hour and a half over that time or just 40 minutes, what did they talk about? And it's seemingly the father, did they, as, I would, once again, I can only use my example of me and my dad because I talk to my dad a lot, almost every day on the phone. We find a lot of things to talk about, whether that has to do with sports or old fishing stories or whatever else. What did Brandon and his father talk about? That his father has never brought all of that up could tell me something. Could tell me, because 40 minutes on the phone is a long time. Of course, I do interviews that are 2 hours long, so 40 minutes is nothing. But 40 minutes is a long time to talk to somebody, even if it's 40 minutes, not even an hour and a half. What exactly were they talking about? What was Brandon's demeanor? What was he talking about? What did he say he did that night? Did he explain how he got ditched? Did he explain why he didn't want to call some towing service? Did that even come up? Did the father bring it up and, Brandon dismissed it? Or these are all important questions when you try to analyze something like this. And as you would guess, I get exasperated when people ask for help and they've certainly on purpose leave big holes in the story. Shouldn't do that. Any family that's listening to this, don't do that. Don't do that. It's okay. I realize you don't want to speak ill of your missing loved one. You're afraid, well, if I tell everybody that my missing daughter's a drug addict, then they won't pay attention to it. I'm here to tell you, even if your daughter's, salt of the earth person, never did anything like that, unfortunately, eventually everybody, drifts away unless you're willing to keep it out there. It doesn't matter. Rockford, could have been an argument about his activities that night. Speculative, yes, but clearly wasn't a productive call. It was not. George, evening, Ed. Everyone, thanks for looking into Brandon's disappearance, an intriguing case. You're welcome, George. So I have a lot of questions. I know that's once again a cliche within the true crime community. They hear something. Well, I have a lot of questions. Yeah. It's probably unfortunately a very sad but straightforward disappearance. But I think if we knew more about the substance of those calls over that hour and a half, we would really, 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 really be able to narrow down what happened and why certain things weren't done that seemed to be obvious to the rest of us. Because here's what I think I know. Probably Brandon doesn't go missing. If he stays with his car, calls a towing service, and the truck shows up. But it very well be, as Rockford has brought up, and I'm guessing it's brought up many times over the years. No offense, Rockford. That maybe he didn't stick around with his car and call the towing service because he knows if he calls a towing service, what does a towing service usually bring along? A cop. Who's going to look at this car in the ditch and is going to ask Brandon where you were going. And he's going to say, well, I was going here. Then what are you doing on that road? Well, let's take a breathalyzer. And we probably guess where that could have gone. I think. Could be wrong. So that's Brandon Swanson. Certainly am open to the idea of featuring that, his disappearance on an episode of Unfound. My impression, though, is that his family did some media, I think, early on, but I don't even think they do local media these days. I have to go to talk to you later. I have to go. All right, D, good seeing you tonight. All right, let's talk about the yogurt murders. I've known about these for all. Murder's not my thing. I've known about it, but let's move on to that. We got about a half hour to go. I'll just read what was written at Wikipedia, not, of course, the entire thing. But I think there are some things that we can apply to disappearances, even though, of course, these were outright murders. I wouldn't necessarily if there were planned murders, but obviously somebody went in there looking to kill people and were unsolved for a very long time. The 1991 Austin yogurt shop murders was a quadruple homicide, which took place in an I can't believe it's yogurt shop in Austin, Texas, on Friday, December 6th of 1991. The victims were 4 teenage girls, 13-year-old Amy Ayers, 17-year-old Eliza Thomas, 17-year-old Jennifer Harbison, and Jennifer's 15-year-old sister, Sarah. Jennifer and Eliza, so the 17-year-olds, were the employees, while Sarah and her friend Amy were in the shop to get a ride home with Jennifer after it closed at 11. About an hour before closing time, a man who had tried to take advantage of customers in line was permitted to use the bathroom in the back. He waited a while and may have jammed a rear door open. A couple who left the shop just before 11 p.m. as Jennifer closed the store reported seeing 2 men at a table acting furtively, I guess unusually. Around midnight, a police patrolman reported a fire in the shop. Firemen discovered the bodies of the girls inside. The victims had been shot in the head. At least one of them had been raped. A .22 and a .380 pistol were used to commit the murder. So 2 pistols. Interesting. And the perpetrator probably exited through a back door that was found unlocked. The organized method of operation, ability to control the victims, and destruction of evidence by arson pointed to an adult experienced in crime rather than teenagers. According to one of the original detectives, the Austin Police Department collected DNA from a male as a result of one of the rapes, which after testing in 2025 recently was concluded to have originated from serial killer Robert Eugene Brashers. And this is a guy who had his own Wikipedia page before he was ever even connected to these murders. He already had a reputation, was already known out there, obviously not as well known as Jeffrey Dahmer, John Wayne Gacy, the Zodiac Killer, etc. So it says, all right, unlike the others, Amy's body was found in a separate part of the shop. She was not charred, but she had received second and very early third-degree burns on 30% of her body. She was found with a sock-like cloth around her neck. She had been shot the same as the others. However, the bullet had missed her brain. She also had a second bullet wound, which had caused severe damage to her brain, exiting through her lateral cheek and jawline. So you should also know that over the years, several people have been charged. There was people convicted. Those convictions were overturned. Police forced, I'm not saying tortured people or anything, but police forced confessions from people that obviously did not end up having anything to do with these murders. Even another serial killer was suspected. There were false convictions, just like John Mark Carr for John Benet Ramsey. There were fake convictions, false confessions. So over the years, these murders had a little bit of everything. People claiming to have done it, people being forced to say that they did it, even people convicted and overturned. Like I said, a little bit of everything. And once again, these 34 years ago. Now, what is something that's interesting to me that was a topic of conversation? How many of you listen to The Consult? My friend Julia Cowley's true crime podcast that comes out every Wednesday. How long was it ago? A couple months ago, maybe. She and her co-hosts, she really kind of runs the show over there. I know she's the person that really runs everything, but a lot of times there are, of course, other people, other retired FBI profilers who take part. They did make the point, there's overwhelming proof that one person can round up multiple people and kill them, tie them up, and do that. You do not need more than one person. So when we look at this murder, we should not be surprised, even though there were 2 different guns used, which like I said, I think is interesting. It very well could be that this Brashers guy wanted to make people think that it was more than one person. But there is overwhelming proof that one person can kill multiple people and, herd them into an area and kill all of them. It doesn't take multiple people. And what you're usually looking for, as I remember Julia putting it, is you're looking for that consistency from victim to victim. In fact, now that I'm thinking about it, I think this came up actually recently when the West Memphis Three, those three boys that were murdered, and they were all tied up the same way. And Julia and her co-host all came to the conclusion that all of those kids were murdered by one person. Why? Because all three kids, the way they were hogtied, all tied up, all exactly the same way. That they made the estimation that two different people, one person tying two of them up, one person tying the other, would not have been this similar. Something to keep in mind about this. So we should not be surprised that, at least according to the DNA, that there was only one person who did this. So when we think about, some, disappearances where there were multiple people, two people going missing at one time, we might think about, let me see, some people from Unfound's history. Let me, now, of course, there are exceptions. Of course, Laura Bible, Ashley Freeman, we know 3 men were involved in that one. But when we think about, let me just go down here. Tammy, Arthur, and Chad Peters. Remember them? Seemingly they were going into Mexico, never seen again. Chris Mittendorf and Christina Branham. Remember, they seemingly had stolen, allegedly ripped somebody off, and maybe this person caught up with them. We should not automatically think, well, their disappearance is caused by multiple people. Very well could be that they're still missing, and if they were murdered, very likely it was just done by one person. So that's something to keep in mind. Something also to keep in mind is that it's fairly obvious to me, at least the way I read this. I'm not an expert on this disappearance or these murders. I'm guessing there have been people that really, really, really got into this over the years. And I'm guessing there have been extensive podcasts and YouTube channels trying to predict who murdered these girls. Was it some teenager? Was it a bunch of teenagers? Was it a local? I'm sure the theories have been all over the place. But it's fairly obvious to me that this guy, at least on Wikipedia, that was bothering customers and let me read this again. About 1 hour before closing time, a man who had tried to take advantage of customers in line was permitted to use the bathroom in the back. I'm inclined to think that was Robert Brashers. Fairly sure. I don't know what the description was of this guy, if they ever, people who had been in there before closing time who had seen this guy. Were there sketches of this guy? How does it match up with how Robert Brashers looked at the time? Would not surprise me at all if Robert Brashers was this guy. So it seems to me they knew about this guy. They probably had an idea. It's probably this guy that did this. Was probably, was messing around with customers and everything, but they didn't know who the guy was. And they needed science to show that. What's also fairly obvious to me in trying to educate myself as much as I could for tonight, it's clear that Robert Brashers was not on anybody's radar regarding these murders at all. Zero. As I stated, of course, we had fake confessions, forced confessions, looking at a different serial killer, looking here, looking there. Police putting pressure on a lot of people to try to close this case. And, of course, some people, unfortunately, going to jail when they didn't do it. But this seemingly was really, really random. Because when you look at Robert Brasher's history and where he had committed his other crimes and everything, not near Austin. In fact, it's not clear to me that anybody knew that Robert Brashers was even in Austin, Texas on that day. So you can understand why this was so tough to solve. Very, very difficult. And I know some people, when I start saying that, they're going to start Israel Keys and everything else. Yeah, I know. But, and it's also very clear, if it had not been for this DNA, this never gets solved, ever. Because the problem is Robert Brashers has been dead for about 26 years, 27, 26 years. He did something. The police were on his trail. I didn't put it in my notes, but he ended up committing suicide. I think when he was cornered regarding some crime, and they weren't tracking him down because of this. It was for something else that he committed suicide over 25 years ago. He's been dead for quite a while now. If they don't have that DNA, this is never solved, ever. 1,000 years from now, never solved. And unfortunately, this is one of those things where right here in 2025, there are many murders like the yogurt shop murders that don't have DNA that will never be solved. You know, I don't know how long the United States is going to be here, hopefully for the rest of existence. Of course, I won't be here to see it. Maybe I get another 30 years on this planet. Just have to realize how many crimes there are out there, horrendous crimes that will never be solved. As I've stated, I would never tell you which ones because that would be insulting to those guests. But there are several disappearances that Unfound is featured that I'm pretty sure will never be solved. Never. It sucks. It's bad. It's really, really bad. And this is an example of that. The fact is, they were just lucky that, at least in 1991 terms, probably Brashers didn't know anything about that. Whereas today, if there is a Robert Brashers out there and he is looking to do something like this guy did and go to a Starbucks or a Dunkin' Donut or something like that, being that everybody now knows about DNA, if this is pulled off in the same way, and of course there's no video cameras and everything else, that could also go unsolved as well. People got lucky. Luckily, they had something. Luckily, that they could test, and one thing led to another, and they were eventually able to connect it to this Robert Brashers guy who killed other people, but none of his other murders were like this one, where he went into a store and killed 4 teenagers. None of his other murders were like that. So you couldn't even use a kind of modus operandi in trying to narrow down who did this by looking at similar murders around the United States at that point. You couldn't even do that because there was just no pattern at all. Tough, fortunate, lucky, whatever you want to call it, the hand of God or something, whatever you believe in. Very, very lucky that these were solved. Of course, it doesn't bring these girls back to life, but it's better than nothing, I guess. Rockford, oddly, the documentary skipped the part about the guy in line who didn't order yogurt and used the bathroom. I believe the retired copper noticed him worked with the sketch artist. Okay, Rockford. I know a lot of people make fun of Wikipedia. You can't trust it and everything. I have to say that for the most part, at least for disappearances, I find Wikipedia to be fairly accurate. I've never seen anything that was anything that comes to mind right at this moment that I thought was a really, really, really gross misrepresentation of a disappearance. Because of course, not a lot of Unfound's disappearances are on Wikipedia. Of course, Jody Huisentruit's are. The Colonial Parkway murders are on there. Mara Murray's is on there. My impression is Wikipedia gets things right most of the time when it comes to disappearances. Murder's harder for me to say because that's really not my business. But so I have to take for granted that the write-up for the yogurt murders here is fairly accurate, although I'm sure there's a lot more details and everything else. So very fortunate. Great job. They never gave up on this. But let's just admit it. DNA is what solved this. This was not a disappearance that was solved with boots on the ground and, solving a murder the Columbo way. This was solved the 21st century way with a person in a lab making a connection, and we need those people too. Just like for disappearances, we need those scuba teams going out there into rivers, finding cars and everything else, even though those kinds of disappearances are very, very small percentages of disappearances overall. Every little bit helps. So there you go. The yogurt shop murders. I'm guessing probably those families thought, man, these are never going to be solved. Well, they almost weren't. They almost weren't. Just what do we got? About 15 minutes left. Let me just go through some things. Maybe I'll get to one more story before I'm done. The Stephen Kocher poll. I had asked the question in the discussion group, do you think that Stephen had ever been to that neighborhood before? Overwhelmingly, people said yes in the discussion group. In fact, let me take a real close look at the percentages. Where are they? Wow, 100%? No, that can't be right. Let me refresh this. Is that right? I asked the question, had Stephen Kocher ever been to that neighborhood before? And wow, it is 100%. I just put that poll in today, so I don't know how many people answered it. But right now it's 100%. I would say that's a little skewed. That's personally what I think. But I do realize that there are many people out there who believe he was never in that neighborhood before. I certainly respect their opinion. That's not what I think. But if somebody wants to think that, that's not crazy. If they just want to think he'd never been there, his first time going on Evening Lights Drive or whatever, fine by me. It's just not what I think. What else going on here? I know this is going to seem funny. Did any of you watch the Ryder Cup this past weekend? It was thrilling, even though, the United States was getting blown out and then they made it close at the end. I was listening while I was working on this balcony, the door, and doing some other things. I was listening to a couple of golf podcasts today about the Ryder Cup. And I got to tell you, I was shocked by the language. The amount of F-bombs and things, and I think these are fairly mainstream golf podcasts. I think they're on Spotify. I was just shocked at that they were talking about a major sporting event and the R-rated language that was used. And I'm not a prude. I've been known to do some swearing out in the disc golf and elsewhere as well. But we don't swear. There's no swearing that goes on Unfound. In fact, the guest does, like recently with Leo Wagner's brother, I muted out, I deleted out, because I realized that some of you do listen to this podcast in the car with your kids and whoever else, and maybe just adults who maybe are, with the language and everything. And it's amazing to me how much that I think takes away from the professionalism. And I'm no prude, not at all. But not needed. I don't mind swearing and everything. I love Pulp Fiction. They can just say the F-bomb as many times as they want in Pulp Fiction because that's the way it is. The Sopranos, Goodfella, well, whatever. It's just the way it is. If they don't do that, then it seems kind of weird. But in these podcasts, how many of those podcasts are fathers wanting to listen to golf with their sons? Or mothers with their daughters, or fathers with their daughters, or mothers with their sons? A lot of kids getting into golf these days, and they want to listen to some, analysis of what happened this past weekend. And the hosts are just F this and they F this up. And it was shocking. It was really shocking. I know it sounds like a total prude, like I need to go off to a monastery or something. But I want to assure you, obviously, by 9 years in, that Unfound is PG. We cover some very adult topics. We do talk about prostitution and drug use and infidelity and those things. But I think I've kept it pretty good PG. Pretty good. Just don't need that stuff. Like I said, I was shocked. Yeah, I do that. It was just amazing to me. If there any Super Bowl coverage, podcasts after the fact, they're dropping F-bombs. I don't know. Who are these people? Who do these people think their listeners are? It's really weird. Moving on, Unfound now and Found. I was going to get those done today, but being this whole porch thing revealed itself, did not get it done today. Hopefully I get it done tomorrow. If not, it'll probably take me over into Wednesday. But I've already picked out the Unfound now disappearance and the Found disappearance to discovery. I've collected all the information. I just have to arrange it and record it. But those will be coming out within the next couple of days. Of course, Unfound now for everybody and Found for all of you YouTube and Patreon supporters. Moving on, the Unfound database, I've gotten to mess around with a little bit. My buddy Cameron has put the first version of together. There's still some tweaks that need to be done. But wow, did I have some fun messing around with that this past weekend. Like while I was watching the Ryder Cup, I was on this computer over here, toggling different things, all these different criteria and parameters that are set up in there. Very, very interesting. Like I said, there's still some tweaking that needs to be done, but I think it's going to be about as close to as my imagination is, reality could get to my imagination. Being able to go in and just, I want to see all the disappearances of married people. Boom. I want to see all the disappearances of married people who disappeared in cities. I want to do a search for all married people who disappeared in cities and their ages are between the ages of 30 and 50. On and on and on. Spectacular. It's real easy to use. Very excited about that. Don't know when it's going to be public because I still have to figure out where I'm actually going to put this on the internet. I think it's going to go on the Unfound website. I just have to figure out what is the programming and everything that needs to go in to make that happen. And website stuff is not my strong suit, but it's just about exactly as I imagined it. It's very simple, no whiz-bang stuff. And I'll probably still have to do a YouTube video on how to use it because, like I said, I want to make sure anybody of any computer literacy level can use it. I don't want just the whiz-bang, high IQ people to be able to use this. I want the common person, the lay person, whether you're 70 or 20, to be able to understand how to use this. And so for somebody who's not as advanced into computers, it may not be totally intuitive. So I'm going to have to make a video regarding that, the kind of a tutorial before I ever make it public. And I will work that out over the next few weeks. Also, next Monday, I'll be talking to A&E again. That channel. They're going to be doing a show or a series on runaways, and they want my input. And so I am more than happy to talk to them. I don't think there's going to be any filming or anything. This is just going to be over the phone to start. But they're going to be doing something on runaways, and I look forward to that happening next Monday. One more thing before I get to Friday's episode. There was this 17-year-old who went missing here locally, just north of me, Marion County, up in Ocala, Florida, where Dr. Telesco lives now. This kid went missing, and he texted his mother, yeah, I'm shot. It's 4 Hispanics. They're in a white van. You should have seen all the people here in my Florida area that were, saying, hey, this kid, he's gotten abducted. He's gotten abducted. He's gotten abducted. Look for him. He's been shot, all this. I read, and I'm like, this didn't happen. It was, granted, this is my work, but it was so weird seeing all of these people, saying this kid was shot. Can you believe that? And his phone was cracked in half and everything. And I'm sitting here thinking, none of this happened. This did not happen. This kid was lying. This kid is lying. Guess what? He was lying. Really, he texted his mother after he got shot. Really? Bad. His name's Caden Spite, S-P-E-I, or Spate, S-P-E-I-G-H-T. You can look it up. Caden, C-A-D-E-N, and then last name, S-P-E-I-G-H-T. It's one of those things where you do this work long enough, you automatically become in tune with these things. And it was funny because I wasn't the only one. I was not the only one going through the comments that were kind of like, really? And it's amazing how other people jump down their throats. Oh, this happened. Why would you ever doubt that? You think that anybody would ever make this up? Yeah. I'm going to keep saying this for all of you. It pays to be cynical in this business. It pays to be cynical. Just remember that. It's better to be a doubting Thomas than to be trusting everybody. I know it sucks. But yes, he texted his mother, and what they found out was that instead he had gone to a Walmart and bought a bike, and eventually they tracked him down somewhere, somehow. And of course, there was a racial element, kind of like Papini, Sherry Papini, claiming 2 Hispanics kidnapped her. This kid claiming it was 4 Hispanics. This is what happens when you make a certain group, ethnicity group, a political target. Then you're going to start getting people, bad people, making up crimes that these people never commit. There is fallout for doing something like that. The fact is, just want to remind people, white people, more than any other group in the United States, commit more crimes than anybody else. Yes, it's because there's more of us. I know. But just remember that. In the United States, white people commit more crimes than anybody else. So this Friday, and when I say white people, I mean like Western, European, of course, technically, scientifically, Hispanics, Latinos are white as well. You know what I mean? But people of the ethnicity of England, Ireland, Germany, France, Italy, those groups that have immigrated to there over the last 300 years, they commit more crimes than anybody else. This Friday, we are going to actually cover a real sex trafficking disappearance. Corinna Slusser. She's usually from Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania, but she went missing from the Queens part of New York on September 20th of 2017. I did the interview today with her aunt, Julie. And you know me when it comes to sex trafficking and how so many things get blown out of proportion. You've heard me talk about here. Everybody's just trying to say everything is sex trafficking. Well, these people have provoked me enough that we're going to cover a real sex trafficking disappearance, just like we did with JSC Foster way back when. And hopefully everybody after this will be able to see the differences between a real one and all those other ones that people think are sex trafficking and are not. You can look it up. It's on Amos. It's on the Charlie Project. I remember when this happened. As a matter of fact, it was after Unfound got started. Corinna, Crina Slusser, SLUSSER, September 20th, 2017, from the Queens part of New York City. Her aunt, Julie, who did a fantastic interview today, is the guest. That's all I got for you tonight. Did Brandon Swanson, the yogurt shop murders, the feel-good story about Trevor Nichols. Man, I got a lot done tonight. My voice still feels pretty good, but that's all I have for you tonight. I hope you all found this very informative. Keep your heads on swivels out there. Do not be a topic of my podcast. Charlie, if you're still here, say hi to the kids for me. Thank you all for making time on your Monday night for me and the show, especially all of you people who tuned in late. We'll do this all again next Monday night. Good night.